For those of you just jumping on, we are recording tonight, and welcome. The CJC has been focused on creating greater connections between local news and the communities we serve, with 7 major media outlets and nonprofit organizations like the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library and the Knight School of Communication at Queen's University. The Charlotte Journalism Collaborative has focused on collaborative journalism that uncovers the stories and solutions that help us as a city address affordable housing and stop housing harm. We've amplified important news and information, brought people together to share their stories, and we've worked together at events like our annual Local News Impact Summit. We've held programs and town halls like tonight to provide these opportunities to dig deeper with the mission of, as we always say, finding solutions and forming communities together. I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight for the first in a series of Solution City programs. If you've not read these stories, they are all available at charlottejournalism.org. Just look for the Solution City headline, and you'll see links to each story in both English and Spanish below. Our hope is that we create this space where people from various parts of the country who have this common goal of addressing the affordable housing crisis can share ideas, ask each other questions, and learn from potential solutions. I also want to thank Wells Fargo for their support of this program tonight, and thank the partners of the CJC for their commitment to work together creatively and with impact for the people of Charlotte. Finally, I want to thank Rachel and the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library for hosting these virtual spaces, and to our guests for joining us this evening for their time, expertise, and inspiration. Before I turn things over to Nick, and I think he's back on, well, we'll wait for Nick to come back on. I'll keep going. So I do want to let you know that we are recording the program again tonight. For those of you who have hopped on in the past minute, it will be on YouTube later. So I hope you'll share it with others. I'll be sending out a link in our e-newsletter, and you can sign up for that newsletter on the website as well. We ask that you do stay on mute for most of the program. We do plan to have an opportunity to ask questions at the end, but you can also add questions onto the chat throughout the night, and Rachel and I will be keeping an eye on that. Finally, our next program, Solution City Part 2, will be on Thursday, April 6th at 6 p.m. And in that conversation, Jenna Contino from the Charlotte Observer will bring together developers from Nashville and Charlotte to see how they increase affordable housing by partnering with nonprofits. Now, Nick is still not here, so we will get going with some introductions to our 2 wonderful guests, Deanna Sargent from Jumpstart Philly, and I'll let you both introduce yourselves because I do not have my notes around your titles. So, and the lovely Sharice Blackman from Westside Community Land Trust. So let's start with Deanna, and then I'm going to show a quick video from Jumpstart. But if you two could take the moment to introduce yourself, and I apologize for not having those notes with me as well.
Sure, it's perfectly fine, Chris. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be before you this evening. I'm Deanna Sargent, and I'm here wearing sort of 2 hats. So my first hat is I'm here on behalf of the Jumpstart program, working on behalf of Ken Weinstein, the creator of Jumpstart Germantown and the overall Jumpstart model, as well as his colleague, Angie Williamson. So I'll be talking this evening about the Jumpstart program, and also the other hat that I wear, working on behalf of Sinair as the Vice President of Community Development in Wilmington, Delaware. I also have the experience of launching Jumpstart Wilmington in Wilmington, Delaware. So my first hat is really working with Ken Weinstein and Angie Williamson on national outreach and speaking to organizations throughout the country that are hopefully interested in launching a Jumpstart program in their market, and also being able to bring that actual lens of launching a Jumpstart program in my market to really talk through the technical aspects of launching a successful program. So happy to be before you today. And I thought it would be great to kick off the Jumpstart conversation by sharing a very short 2-minute video that was put together by my strategic marketing communications colleague that showcases a few of our graduates from our first 3 cohorts, just sharing their experience about the program, because it's one thing to hear about the program from us, the people who are sort of behind the scenes leading the training, but it's another thing to hear from actual graduates of the program and why they went through the program and how they plan to actually utilize the program and what they've learned to revitalize properties in their neighborhoods. So Chris, if you'd like to go to the video now, that would be great.
Great. And we'll show that real quick and then turn it over to Sharice and Nick.
And Chris, you may have to share it with the sound.
If we need a little more time to figure out, we might be able to come back to it. Yeah.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, well, we can try to play that. If you can figure that out, Chris, too, we can also drop that in a little bit later.
And I can introduce myself
right.
while he's trying to get
Yeah.
the sound. I also think if he unmutes himself, it'll probably play out loud for us as well. But good evening, everybody. I'm Sharice Blackman, the Executive Director of the Westside Community Land Trust here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Our mission is to create permanently affordable housing with community-centered development in West Charlotte and beyond. We were founded by neighbors to work toward that aim. And so our goal and our intention is to make sure that we are being integral to the character that they have established and the ideas that they have set forth for how we create solutions together instead of having a prescriptive approach. So I'm really excited to be here with you guys today. I'm a fan of Deanna's and Jumpstart Philly, Wilmington, Germantown. And actually, when I was writing notes, I wrote down Deanna from Jumpstart Charlotte. So maybe that's a sign that there is a future partnership that can maybe be birthed from this. But anyway, again, just happy to be here and to be learning from a fellow colleague and pioneering this work.
And I'll introduce myself as well. I'm Nick Canal. I'm a local reporter with WFAE. And over the last year or so, I've been doing a lot more reporting on housing. And the way I kind of got involved in this a little bit is last year, I did some reporting on the Jumpstart Philly program, which Deanna is affiliated with. And I thought it was this really cool program. And as we'll kind of, hear more about that, it trains local residents in Philadelphia and elsewhere to fix up old, vacant or dilapidated buildings and then sell them to local residents as affordable housing. And ever since I did that story, I've been really curious about similar efforts kind of underway here in Charlotte, which Sharice is kind of involved in. And so I am very excited to talk to both of you kind of about this. And also, I'm really excited for everyone who's watching along at home right now with us live, and I guess all of our future watchers on YouTube. So hello to you as well. So, Chris, how are we
Okay.
doing?
Yes. So sorry about that. We will try the video again. Obviously, we did not
Okay.
test that in our preliminary tech rehearsals here, but let me try it again and keep myself unmuted for the video. Hold on 1 second. Sorry. There we go.
Jumpstart Wilmington really changed my life.
This is bigger than us. This really makes a difference.
It's just getting started.
Community focused development is an initiative and a mindset where everyone plays their part in making their neighborhood a place that's thriving and growing.
It really gets to the people, but not just the environment in and of itself. The people are at the heart of it.
Just taking a step back and reevaluating the reason why we're in our communities and the reason why we're doing the things that we do.
I'm born and raised here in Wilmington, as well as most of my family. It was important to connect with a program that's going to change our communities.
When it first came out, I was so ecstatic. I was texting it to my friends. I put it on my Instagram story.
Wilmington has a lot of potential. I thought I could do my part in helping the city.
We all know that we need safer streets, better schools for our children. Maybe you didn't know where to start, but with this program, I was given the tools. I was actually linked up with an awesome mentor. This program provides you with the knowledge and tools that you need to become a developer.
To know the what, why, and how of the real estate development.
We learned how deeply complex a project can be. And oftentimes you need to have people who can encourage you, who can work with you, who can partner with you.
I was really motivated to tackle future big ideas.
And I want to contribute to the West Side. I want to play my part.
My next step is actually to identify a few different properties that will make a great change within the community.
Do it.
You want to be a part of something and make a legacy for yourself, just do it.
All right. Thank you. Oh. All right. Fabulous. Thank you for sharing that, Jumpstart and Deanna. So basically, I've got some questions I kind of want to ask the both of you, and then for everyone who's kind of listening too, we'd love to hear your questions as we're kind of talking. If you guys have thoughts or questions that you want to write into the chat, please do that, and we can see those and relay some of those to the people that we're talking to. I want to talk about Jumpstart Philly, but first, actually, I wanted to ask Charisse about the West Side Land Trust, actually. And so I wanted to ask, since I believe you started, or at least you helped start this program here in Charlotte, the West Side Land Trust, I believe in 2017. The first few projects that you worked on, I understand you guys were like rehabilitating donated homes to sell to local residents for an affordable price. And I wanted to ask, why the focus on home ownership? Why didn't you fix these homes up to rent?
So first and foremost, our organization was actually founded by neighbors, so residents that lived within the community. I wasn't a part of the initial founding of the organization, but neighbors noticed the displacement and gentrification that was happening within their community. They decided that they wanted to fight back against it to ultimately create staying power for themselves and their peers and their neighbors and family members. And so they started organizing, hosting house meetings, doing some research research, and they found the community land trust model. And so after finding that, they then worked together to establish it as a nonprofit and then hired me on later in the future to help carry the work forward. As far as our initial projects, so there has always been a strong focus on stay in power, which we know true power is in ownership, not in renting. So creating staying power. B, there was a focus on home ownership as well to help build wealth. So the goal is to not only create an affordable unit or an affordable place to live, but to also ensure that neighbors are able to access that space. They're able to pass it down from generation to generation. They're able to build wealth. They're able to gain returns and such from their investment within their own community. And so that is why we started with home ownership to remain integral to creating staying power and also building wealth in communities that have largely not had access to those types of opportunities.
And can you talk about like the first project that the Land Trust worked on? I guess someone actually like donated an entire physical home to your organization.
Yes. So our organization started, like many other organizations, as a concept. So we were very much in seed form when I first came on to the Land Trust. And so we knew that we wanted to create affordable housing. We had a very small budget to be able to do so. And so there was actually a family that owned a home in the Sedgefield community. They wanted to either demolish that home to build a new house on the lot or to find something meaningful to do with the house. So they reached out to us. There were some key partners, local nonprofits, some faith leaders who reached out to us and let us know about the opportunity to partner with that family to receive that home as a donation. And so because that was the path of least resistance, it was less expensive to be able to move a house and renovate it. That is what we decided to do for our very first project. And at that time, we didn't even have the budget for that. So we reached out to other faith community partners. We reached out to some key funders like Knight Foundation, United Way, and such, who provided seed funding to allow us to be able to do that project. And we literally put the house on beams, moved it from one part of Charlotte to the west side of Charlotte, and then completed a full renovation. And it is now a beautiful home that sits next to a mansion of sorts that sold for almost $500,000 cash. And we're able to create the same, a very similar aesthetic with our home and sell it more affordably.
Who eventually bought that home?
So actually that house is about to go under contract now. And there is a neighbor in the community. I can't mention his name yet because he hasn't closed, but he was one of our founding board members, lived in Enderley Park for decades. He's a senior citizen, never owned a home. And since we did that project, he wanted to buy that house. And so now we see that coming to fruition. So he will be the future homeowner of that property. And we will definitely come back to share and celebrate that news.
So Deanna, the Jumpstart program that you work with is like a little bit similar because you guys are also fixing up and repurposing old existing homes into affordable housing. Is that right?
Yeah, so just to back up a little bit and give an overview about the Jumpstart program. So the Jumpstart program is a training program for aspiring developers. And it started in Germantown, which is a neighborhood in Philadelphia, by Kim Weinstein, who's a very experienced real estate developer, residential and commercial, over 30 years. And he started the program because initially he had a bunch of people who were interested in real estate development come to him looking for mentorship. And after having several one-on-one coffees, he decided that a more sustainable solution would be to develop a training curriculum where people who were interested in developing properties, particularly residents, local residents in the community who were interested in developing vacant and blighted properties in the community, could go through the training, get that fundamental aspect of real estate development through the 7 jump steps that are included in the training program, Also getting access to a mentor once they've completed the program, who's an experienced developer, to help guide them through their first, second, or third development project, and also get them connected to a development network so that they can continue their education and also work with their peers to navigate different challenges and successes. And also the third and most important, I think, pillar is access to financing, because a lot of aspiring developers who are seeking to develop, they may not necessarily have the track record where they can go to a bank and actually get funding to develop property. So that's the core of the Jumpstart program. I would say in addition to that is sourcing property. So you have the training, you have the knowledge, you have the education, you have access to resources such as mentors that can help you navigate the process. And you also have access to this financing mechanism that helps you get your foot in the door. But it's all for naught if you can't actually find a property to develop, meaning that although there's a lot of vacancy and blight, you being new to the development space, it may not be as easily accessible for you to source a property. So the Jumpstart program actually partnered with the Philadelphia Housing Authority to create a lottery program for some of their graduates to get their hands on acquiring property for $10. So these are properties that have been long-term vacant and blighted in areas of Philadelphia where there's a high level of vacancy and also affordability needs. And so they were able to, if they were fortunate in receiving a property through this lottery program, to acquire a property for $10, then they could receive a Jumpstart loan to renovate the property. And the property had to be sold at a sales price less than $175,000 to maintain affordability. And it also had to go to a homeowner at or below 80% area median income. So through that, the partnership between the Philadelphia Housing Authority and the Jumpstart program, we were able to take that training and take those aspiring developers and actually equip them to create affordable housing within the Philadelphia market. And we're in Wilmington, Delaware, we are replicating many of the aspects of the Jumpstart Germantown program. So we've developed very similar partnerships with our Wilmington Housing Authority, as well as the City of Wilmington's Department of Real Estate and Housing, and our local land bank, because we are fortunate enough to have a land bank in Wilmington, where we have properties that have been exclusively set aside for our Jumpstart Wilmington graduates to acquire and redevelop. And the first set of housing units under this, we call it a property acquisition pilot program in Wilmington. Under the pilot, the first 7 homes are set aside exclusively for home ownership and to be sold to homeowners at or below 80% AMI. And then the next 5 homes, which will be partnering with our Wilmington Housing Authority, that will be exclusively focused on affordable rental at or below 80% AMI, because I wholeheartedly agree with Sharice that home ownership is needed to stabilize communities. And so that is a priority in many of our Wilmington neighborhoods. And so we wanted to have that be the focus for our first phase of our property acquisition pilot program. In addition to that, we know that there's a need for affordable rental as well, as people may not be ready to move to home ownership yet. And so the Wilmington Housing Authority has come in with 5 homes to dedicate for affordable rental, again, at or below 80%
to donate. Yeah, and I just want to, and also, I don't know if you said it before, so Deanna is actually in Wilmington, Delaware right now. I think that's right. And we were saying Jumpstart Philadelphia because that's where the program got started, but it's now kind of expanded to these other cities. And I believe you actually helped launch the program in Wilmington. And I guess, you know, just to from my understanding of it, so kind of the difference between what you guys are doing with Westside Land Trust in Charlotte is you guys are actually training residents to be the developers, to actually fix up the homes themselves, and then they get to sell it and I guess keep the profit for whatever they bought the house for and then flipped it and were able to sell it as an affordable house.
Exactly. We provide the training. We connect them to mentors. We connect them to also a real estate development network. But the rest is pretty much on them in terms of identifying a contractor, real estate attorney, a realtor. And once they identify that contractor, they work on rehabbing that home. We haven't seen a lot of new construction yet, at least in the Wilmington market. But once they rehab that home and they sell it, the net proceeds goes to them as profit. Or if they decide to convert it into a rental, then that net cash flow will go to them as profit. So it's also a wealth building opportunity for them because they're serving as entrepreneurs, and we incorporate that aspect into our training program as well, and helping them to understand how to operate as a small business.
Yeah, and you guys will actually loan them the money as well to actually purchase the home and do the rehabilitations. So it's
yes, we provide them with a loan. We have a Jumpstart Wilmington loan program, which has very competitive rates for them to help them to get access to capital. So we do provide them with a very favorable loan. And then the Jumpstart Germantown and Jumpstart Philly programs, they have a loan program for their market as well.
I was curious, like once these new developers through the program finish rehabilitating the homes, do you guys encourage them to sell or to rent, since I guess they could do either? And like Charisse had talked before about how homeownership is very important to wealth building, is that the preference for them to sell it?
So that's a very great question. A lot of people come into our program with an idea of how they would like to go about building out their real estate portfolio. And some people are interested in the investment strategy, but some people come in with a clear intention of wanting to create home ownership. I can say that for the Jumpstart Wilmington program in our market and our orientation, and I'll say that this is a part of the overall Jumpstart philosophy, is being a good neighbor, really engaging with the community and understanding the neighborhood plan. So that's true across all of the Jumpstart programs. And one of the things that we emphasize in our Jumpstart Wilmington orientation is understand what that local neighborhood plan is and what the needs are. So even if their interest is rental, trying to be sensitive and considerate to the a particular neighborhood's needs of home ownership, especially if there's already a high rental tenure, to maybe be more sympathetic and empathetic to the fact that in order to stabilize that neighborhood and lead revitalization, to consider affordable home ownership in that particular neighborhood that they're interested in developing in. So we really try to home in on understanding what that local neighborhood need is and try to work with that community organization, being a good community partner like Charisse was talking about, and working beside them to build out housing that suits the need of that particular neighborhood. But at the end of the day, it really is their decision, but we really do try to emphasize that. But I am happy to share, and I do have some stats from the Jumpstart Philly program, that about and this is based on the loans that they've given out, 62% of those are for sale home ownership and 38% are rental. So in that Philadelphia market with the Jumpstart with the Jumpstart Philly and Jumpstart Germantown loans that they have closed on, the majority of them have been for home ownership.
And someone had put a question into our chat asking how that $175,000 sales price ceiling was established. I believe that's within the Jumpstart Philly program, there is a smaller program where you guys have partnered, like you said, with the city's housing authority, which donates 10 homes 10 or 11 every year that have just been abandoned that I guess the city has taken possession of. And then the people who were trained to be developers can enter a lottery to get one of these homes for $10, which is an incredible deal. And I think it's through that program that they are then required, they can't sell it for more than $175,000.
Correct. And I don't know the direct answer. I would have to follow up with Ken and Angie for that 175 ceiling, but my assumption would be that that's more in line with the affordability parameters in that particular market, because I know that many homes, the average sales price I think is above $200,000, but also having that parameter of the fact that the house has to be sold to someone at or below 80% AMI ensures that that home is going to be sold to someone that is going to be affordable.
And I'll say too, I believe I actually talked to one of the people for my story last year who got one of these homes for $10. He was a really nice guy, and I believe he was using the money that he earned from that flip to get himself through some college classes for and he wanted to do a startup and everything. So it's really cool to talk to him. And I think he said he found out that he was going to get that house for $10 on his birthday. So cool. Happy birthday to him. Let's see. Let's see what I wanted to ask. So Charisse, so the West Side Land Trust right now, so you guys kind of rehabilitated a couple homes that were donated to you guys. I believe right now you guys are now actually in the middle of building some new construction, like it's 120 brand new apartments for seniors in West Charlotte on land that the organization purchased. These apartments will be rented, I believe. Can you talk about that project?
Yeah, so that's the historic Nathaniel Carr project. There was actually a piece of land that was vacant, and there was a developer, an out-of-state developer, who was coming in and had put that land under contract and was planning to develop senior living there. And neighbors reached out to us because when they heard about the rezoning, they wanted to have a stake in the game because the land is historic land. It was owned by a Black man in the 1920s when Black people essentially could not own land. And they wanted to make sure that they were preserving the rich history of that land while also maintaining their power as to how it's used and how it's developed. And also neighbors in that community have worked very hard. So this is on the West Boulevard corridor. They've worked very hard to identify their vision and to communicate that. And one of the things that they've been communicating is they really would prefer home ownership there. But if this development was going to come, they wanted to be a part of it and wanted to have a say as far as what it looked like, the name of it, and things of that nature. And so they reached out to us. We started having conversations with the developer, and the developer agreed to allow us to purchase the land and put them on a ground lease. So they're on a 99-year inheritable renewable ground lease. And we set certain terms in our ground lease to ensure that those units remain affordable. And the goal is that at the end of the land use restriction agreement, which is typically about 30 years for LIHTC developments, that we will shift those units to home ownership units. And so although there is a long lead time, these units will eventually shift to what community members have identified for what they want for themselves and the future generations along the corridor. And so, although we are firm believers in home ownership and the power of home ownership, there's also a need for a mix of properties. We know that everybody is not home ownership ready. We know that everybody is not mortgage eligible currently. And so there is a need to be able to provide rental housing, affordable rental housing for individuals that may not be prepared to become homeowners, because the fact of the matter is everybody needs access to high quality, safe, and affordable housing. And so we're excited about this project. We're excited about community members being a part, naming it. We even executed one of the city's first community benefits agreements in partnership with the West Boulevard Neighborhood Coalition, our partner there along the corridor, to be able to get a variety of things in place for their organization, as well as measures to ensure that they continue to have control over that site and over that space.
You guys think that you would want to do more new construction moving forward, this like building of whole new units of affordable apartments or homes? It's because it's a little bit of a departure from what you guys have been doing before, which was rehabilitating the existing homes.
Yeah, so our goal is preservation. We want to preserve land and space. We would like to preserve the units and the infrastructure within our communities as much as we can. There are constraints that we sometimes have to be able to do that. So we started with the house move because of budget constraints. Also now it's a little bit less expensive to build a new construction house than it is for us to buy an existing property and renovate that. We know in Charlotte that the cost for homes and land is skyrocketing. And so it's challenging to be able to purchase an existing home, renovate it, and still sell it affordably. But we are looking for innovative ways to provide like deeper levels of subsidy so that we can continue to ensure that the character of communities are preserved. And sometimes that is challenged when you are creating new construction because it's not a part of the initial character and landscape of that community. One of the things that I'm most excited about now that we're working on, which actually today we went under contract on 35 existing units in a West Charlotte community. So we did have the ability through support from our local government and our funding partners and such to be able to acquire 35 existing homes that we will be able to preserve. And I also think that that's the power of the Jumpstart model, as well. Typically we see in communities disinvestment, we then see reinvestment, and then we see gentrification. So I think there's just so much power behind a model where the neighbors are able to be the investors in their own communities and the neighborhoods that they live in and they've called home for so long, to be able to not only stabilize the community and offer additional units of affordability, but to also to be able to build wealth outside of just the home that they own, but in other ways within their community. So.
Okay, well, that means we have some breaking news tonight then. Thanks for breaking the news on this conversation. And 35 homes, so how big is the portfolio right now for Westside Land Trust? Because 35, that's a lot.
Yeah. So I'm still in awe sometimes of what we are accomplishing. So our goal with our original strategic business plan and budget was to create 50 permanently affordable homes over a 5-year period. And that would end, the end of that 5 years will be this year, 2023. And so we have been able to produce 129 units. That includes 9 single family homes that we constructed or self-developed, largely house donations and house moves where we renovated those homes, and then the 120 units that are coming and as senior living, the Nathaniel Carr site. And so then now we'll add on those additional 35 homes, which, we went from self-developing 9 units across a 5-year period to now having 35 homes in the first quarter of 2023. So I think it just demonstrates the exponential growth that we are experiencing as the Community Land Trust, and also as a trusted developer for community members. Like, really, that's the goal. So just like Nathaniel Carr, neighbors came to us and said, hey, can you purchase this? We want to maintain power here. We purchased that. These 35 homes came into our portfolio the same way. So neighbors were like, we learned of a landlord here that is trying to sell off his entire portfolio, and we have people living in these houses. We want to make sure that they're not displaced. We want to make sure our neighborhood doesn't flip. And so they asked us to purchase this. It wasn't in our budget, but where there's a will, there's a way. And so here we are, as a trusted developer, trusted partner for neighbors within these communities.
A question that someone had sent in, Rachel had written, Charlotte has very low housing stock. How do you guys manage to secure housing, especially with big investors wanting to buy so much? Have you guys found that you've had to compete with investors over properties in Charlotte?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So that's one of the things in all the conversations that I'm a part of is like, we need access to flexible capital. And I'm sure Deanna can agree, especially with providing financing and funding for residents for their the units that they're developing.
Well,
but it's challenging because investors have access to cash. And for us as a nonprofit organization, the funds that we receive come with a lot more red tape. So we need to have a meeting and a meeting about the meeting, and we need to present a plan, and we need to write the grant, and we need to, do all of these things before we can access the funding. And in the amount of time that it takes to be able to do that, investors can come in and close the deal much more quickly. So that definitely has been a challenge for us. I am hopeful, though I remain hopeful, because we have seen a lot of our funding partners begin to move more quickly and leverage more innovation. Like right now, we have a partnership with LISC, Charlotte, and Fifth Third Bank, and they have been extremely helpful for large sums of money. They were pivotal to us being able to even acquire the Nathaniel Carr site. They came in and offered, allowed us to access $1.125 million as a recoverable grant, no interest charged on it, and we were able to receive those funds in about a month. And so we have, continue to see that type of funding and those types of relationships. But yes, it still is challenging to be able to compete with investors.
And this kind of maybe leads into a question from Eli, who, full disclosure, is a coworker of mine, my editor, who wanted to ask, are there other non-traditional sources of capital that could be used for these projects? I don't know if you have thoughts, Sharice.
That could be used for our projects.
To fund these projects, because you said, a lot of the funding can come with all this red tape. Are there kind of non-traditional sources of capital out there?
Yes, absolutely. So I am a supporter of innovation. And so I think that whether there are opportunities for non-conventional funds or not, I think that they definitely could be created. So I think PRI investment, program-related investment, is one of those avenues, and that's what we were able to leverage through Fifth Third, LISC, Rockefeller partnership. Also, access to like private equity funds. So we are in the process of establishing our own private equity fund where we would essentially be able to serve as our own bank for development projects that would decrease the amount of red tape and would allow more flexibility for us to be able to move more quickly. We see things in other areas where there are like giving circles that are in place where groups can contribute, and then you can access those dollars without as many restrictions. And then now we know that there's a big movement for trust-based philanthropy, which for us has given us access to larger amounts of capital over longer periods of time with less restrictions. And so that's something that has been helpful. But there's, I'm sure that as we continue to research and grow, like we can identify and pinpoint other models that people are using across the nation.
I would say you're definitely on the right track. The second hat I wear in working for Scenair, we're actually a community development financial institution, a CDFI, so very similar to LISC. And so I think all of the things that I was thinking about, you stated. I think definitely philanthropy, what you're doing is very innovative. Talking to your local CDFIs, which you've already reached out to LISC, and PRI investments are also a good avenue and a good approach. So you're definitely going down the right track. Kudos to you.
Deanna, I wanted to move to you and ask you, since you are a nationwide recruiter for the Jumpstart program, and like we said a little earlier, you helped expand the program from Philadelphia into Wilmington, Delaware, where you're at right now. I mean, one of the things that I had been thinking about and I was curious about since I did the story was how Philadelphia is a larger city than Charlotte or even Wilmington. They have some of the nation's oldest housing stock. So that means that there just is a lot more vacant and dilapidated homes, for the program to kind of fix up, and just like a lot more people as well. So has this program worked in smaller, newer cities, I guess?
Absolutely. I would say just in our city alone, in Wilmington, Delaware, which the size of the whole city is the size of just one neighborhood in Philadelphia or Detroit. And so it definitely can work. And there's our newest Jumpstart is in a neighborhood called Martindale Brightwood in Indianapolis, Indiana. So we're also out in the Midwest. And just to share a little bit about one of the reasons why we brought it to Wilmington, and then I can also share some criteria for, you know, what to look for in establishing a Jumpstart program in another neighborhood in this country. In Wilmington, one of the main reasons was with the small city, we have over 1,500 vacant and blighted properties, and that's registered, even more when you're not factoring in registered vacant and blighted property. And with the current development community that we have in Wilmington, that's focusing on affordable housing development and vacancy and blight in our focused neighborhoods, both for-profit and nonprofit, they both said we need more developer capacity. We do not have the ability to address all of this vacancy and blight on our own. So they welcomed competition. They welcomed small scale developers, which was one of the main reasons why we thought it would be great to bring this program to Wilmington to help address the local developer capacity issue in addressing the high level of vacancy and blight. And the reason why I'm harping on vacancy and blight is, you know, just thinking about the ideal neighborhood where a Jumpstart program would be started, it would be a neighborhood that has ample blighted and deteriorated housing stock. And you would also want to consider areas with lower acquisition costs, which would be helpful to developers, and also a reasonable demand for housing. So there's a need for affordable housing in that particular market. So just a few factors to consider in thinking about starting a Jumpstart program in the market. One, are there sufficient opportunities to develop vacant and deteriorated housing in that particular neighborhood or market? Two, are housing prices for vacant and deteriorated properties cost prohibitive for new developers? So, you know, is the acquisition price low, and is the rehab cost reasonable enough for them to make a profit? Because developers do want some sort of incentive to develop in that market. Although we do try to focus on creating socially minded developers, they do want to make some sort of profit. And then third, is there sufficient demand for a quality rental and owner occupied housing? So is there demand there? If developers are creating housing opportunities, diverse housing opportunities, is there a market for that? So those are the three primary things that we challenge people to consider when bringing a Jumpstart program to their market. But there are many markets that are primed for this type of program just based on that criteria alone.
So I know that we definitely have demand here in Charlotte, and we definitely have an affordable housing shortage. Do we have a lot of vacant or dilapidated homes here, Charisse? And also, I know that you guys are focused primarily on the west side, but do we have that kind of, you know, old vacant housing stock in Charlotte?
Yeah, in Charlotte, I don't feel like we see as many vacant and blighted homes that exist, like you see in Detroit or Philly or, you know, up north. We do have some vacant lots that are available. And also, like, I think that one of the challenges that we have are absentee landlords. So typically where we see the most blight, in my experience, has been properties that are owned, they might even be occupied, but just may have like an absentee landlord in place. So identifying those as opportunities to, you know, be able to reclaim space could be a potential.
Do you think we have people in Charlotte who would be willing to go through a program to become like a little mini developer here?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Like, I think this would be a beautiful model to bring to Charlotte. I could definitely see parallels between this model and the land trust and how we could potentially implement something like this. We have very similar guidelines in place, like where we sell our homes to individuals earning less than 80% of AMI. We include a resale formula where the house cannot be sold over a certain amount. It appreciates, but it appreciates at a predictable rate that is agreed to in the ground lease. And so ensuring that individuals can continue to purchase those properties affordably forever and ever in perpetuity. I also like, so for us, we piloted a ADU project in the Lakeview community. And so essentially what we know is that neighbors, those that are most proximate to the challenges, are also usually typically the holders of solutions. And so in the Lakeview community, there are residents there who are like, we own our homes, we own our land, and we want to be a part of the solution. We would like to leverage our own land to create additional units of affordability. And so they came to us with the idea of accessory dwelling units, which is a newer concept here in Charlotte. And so we did facilitate a pilot there where we constructed 2 accessory dwelling units. But how could we support neighbors in being able to develop those types of units on their own land, where they can also build wealth? Or how can we access some of these properties that may have absentee landlords or landlords who are predatory and have individuals on month-to-month leases? How can we gain ownership of those units, subsidize down the price point for the home because we own the land as a land trust, and then support residents with being able to shift those homes or invest in those homes as affordable units? And then lastly, I'll share that there was actually a group of investors that were really passionate about the challenges that they were seeing with corporate landlords. We know that's a challenge here in Charlotte, where a lot of properties are being purchased up and are being held as permanent rentals, and they are largely non-affordable units. And so there was a group that was born out of that, that just regular everyday people who came together and decided they wanted to leverage their personal wealth to be able to create affordability and compete using their own flexible funds with corporate landlords and investors and such. And so I think that demonstrates that there's an appetite within our community to be a part of the solution. And so I could definitely see something like Jumpstart being implemented here.
I just wanted to quickly go back to a question I think I missed from Rosalind earlier. I think this is for Deanna. She was asking if the city does some sort of inspection of these homes before they get fixed up to make sure that they can be fixed up. Have you guys ever had someone start fixing up a home but wasn't able to complete it?
For our property acquisition pilot program, interestingly enough, the 7 city-owned properties that they dedicated to the pilot program, they put in some community development block grant funding, CDBG funding, which is federal funding they receive to stabilize the 7 units. And then they're also contributing more of that CDBG funding to help with gap subsidy to fill out the overall capital stack. So I'm not sure if that directly answers your question about the inspection, but they have they put in $20,000 on the front end to stabilize the properties before the aspiring developers are even going into it. And they've ensured being partners at the table throughout the development process to make sure that the project does get completed.
All right, I'm keeping an eye on time, and I know that we only had an hour, which is too bad because we could go all night. I have just some kind of final wrap-up questions. First, though, I also did want to give both of you, Sharice and Deanna, just an opportunity if you had a question for each other. I don't know if you do or not.
I'm sure I'll have lots of questions. I need to get Deanna's contact information so I can reach out offline.
Yes, I definitely look forward to following up. I can definitely see how the Jumpstart model can work in Charlotte and with Sharice's organization and the wonderful plans that you have for your area. So I definitely look forward to following up after this panel.
Okay. Well, then finally, I kind of wanted to just ask sort of big picture here, since, we've kind of been talking about, both of your programs are, creating these homes for people who need them at affordable prices. But I wanted to ask you guys, kind of big picture, what do you think is the biggest barrier towards making our cities affordable for everyone who's living here? What do you think needs to happen to really kind of solve this crisis? Sharice?
So I'm processing a little bit. I would say that one of our largest barriers to making our city affordable would be innovation, like a lacking appetite for innovation. I try to raise that everywhere I go. We see in different cities and in different places how people try to find creative ways of creating affordability. And I think that because we continue to try to fit a square peg in a round hole, we don't really see a lot of the impact that we want to see. Whereas I think if we were more open to trying out new models and developing in more innovative ways, that we could potentially reach deeper levels of affordability. And I also think that there has to be a focus on equitable development. So not just producing a unit, it's not just about producing a unit, but the goal is, how do we create high quality, affordable, sustainable housing in asset-rich communities? And in communities that have largely experienced this investment, it's more than about creating a home. It's about creating and helping to build up the assets that are currently existing there as well. So how can we continue to leverage models in creative and innovative ways to make sure that we are contributing to the overall built environment and accessibility to opportunities and amenities that are necessary to thrive?
All right. And Deanna, what do you think? How can we solve this?
Two things that I constantly encounter just working in affordable housing development in general is really access to that flexible capital, especially when we're talking about creating affordable home ownership opportunities. There's a serious need for what we call sales gap subsidy. So typically what happens, especially in neighborhoods that have been disinvested in, there's a very low market value. But the cost to rehab a home is significantly higher than the cost that the house will actually sell for, which makes it really, really difficult to create affordable home ownership opportunities. So there's always a need for sales gap subsidy to cover that differential. And so just to provide you with a quick example, a home may cost $200,000 to rehab, but it may only sell for $100,000. So you're dealing with a $100,000 sales gap subsidy that if a developer cannot raise at least that to break even, if not more to profit, what's the incentive for them to develop? And so the houses continue to linger there in the market in that particular neighborhood continues to become distressed. So there's always a constant need for that, and it's always hard for developers to cobble together that funding. In Delaware, we are working with our state agency to pour in a significant amount of ARPA funding from the federal government for that sales gap to create at least 100 affordable homes for affordable housing for home ownership. But that type of funding comes every once in a while. So we need ongoing funding like that to be able to stabilize neighborhoods and to create more affordable housing. And then the second area that I'm constantly touting is on the policy level. Things such as inclusionary zoning, where there's a requirement to include affordable housing when you're developing market rate housing, will help address some of the affordability issues that we see. And it'll also help to create mixed income communities and economically diverse communities as well. So those are two of the things that I constantly elevate when having conversations around affordable housing. So one is a policy solution and the other one is a capital solution, but both are very much needed in order to create more affordable housing.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the American Rescue Plan funds, because that was, I think a lot of that money was used in a way that has transformed a lot of communities in ways we're still kind of figuring out. And I think it's going to be really interesting moving forward to see, you know, as that money kind of runs out, what kind of happens. So anyway, I really want to thank both of you for your time. I really appreciated the discussion. Thank you for taking the time. Thanks to everyone too for listening along and for the great questions. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Sharice and Deanna. And as he said, thank you everyone for joining tonight. Don't forget our next session, part 2, looks at a story from Nashville, and that will be Thursday, April 6th at 6 p.m. WFAE 90.7 and Charlotte News Club are both part of the Charlotte Journalism Collaborative that was launched by the Solutions Journalism Network with funding from the Knight Foundation. We are strengthening the local news ecosystem and increasing opportunities for engagement, just like this program tonight. So we're supported by a combination of local and national grants and sponsorships, and we're so thankful for those supporters. You can see more of our stories and the full Solution City series at charlottejournalism.org, and follow us on social media at CLT Journalism. Thanks, everybody, and have a great night.
Thank you.